My name's Larry and I'm an alcoholic. Before we get into the thick of things here this evening, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the rally committee, all of you, for getting together and making this happen for all of us. It's a lot of work and takes a lot of organization and energy, and I'm grateful for that. I've been coming to this rally for a long time now, and it's always been one of my favorite ones over the years because it takes me back to my beginnings in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was just thinking about this card I got in this string tonight. Years ago, I used to get these cards with numbers on them, and they used to want to take a picture of me in them. So things are looking up since then. I'm Larry. I'm an alcoholic. I'll talk to you a little bit about where I came from and how I got here. I grew up in a small town in the island. My dad was a logger and my mom was a homemaker. And when I was about 5 or 6, we moved out to a logging camp, Franklin River, outside of that town. And I spent a lot of my informative years there growing up, and I was into hunting and fishing and chopping trees down and making forts and that kind of lifestyle. And when I had to go to high school, we moved back into Port Alberni, and I guess that was where I started to really realize that I was kind of bushed from being out in the camp all them years, and I got back into town there, and things were different than the seclusion of that camp, and I didn't feel like I really fit in or measured up. And I had all these things going on. I was a teenager and hormones and what have you, and I got invited to this party. And these guys said, will you come over to so-and-so's house before the party, and we're going to have a few refreshments before it. And so I went to that guy's house that night, and they had a bottle of Kelowna Royal Red wine, the big gallon jugs with the ring on it. And one guy had a bottle of Ghibli's lemon gin, I recall. And God, I got into that night, and I'm telling you, that was my equalizer in life. I had come of age, and I loved the taste of it, the smell of it, but mostly I loved the effect of it. I was at that party, and I became Larry Astaire of the dance floor that night, and I spoke different languages, Swahili and what have you, and at the end of it all, I got pretty sick. But that was my introduction into alcohol, and it would be a couple years later down the road where I quit school and I went to the Queen Charlotte Islands and got a job in a logging camp. And I loved everything about the logging business. My dad had used to take me out there when I was a young kid, and there'd be trees crashing down and yarders working, and the guys were rough and tough, and there was lots of young guys there, and they all had fast cars and hot women on the weekend, and that was just the lifestyle I was drawn to. And so I got that job, and I worked on the boom, and in 4 or 5 months I had some money, and I bought a 64 Merc Marauder, and I was into drinking and what have you, and life was pretty good. And the guy that roomed beside me, I was pretty young in that camp at the time, 15 or 16, Abe was his name, and Abe was schooled in all the wrong ways to live, and he passed all of those great abilities on to me. He kind of mentored me, and we used to load up. I worked Monday to Friday. I was on the tugboats, and get a couple guys in the weekend. We'd head down to Queen Charlotte City, and we'd go to the Queen Charlotte Island Hotel, and in those days, I couldn't get into the pub, so I'd wave one of the guys out and open the trunk of my car and give him some money, and we'd load that trunk right to the hilt with beer, and then we'd go to the liquor store, And then there was a little cafe in that town in Queen Charlotte City, and it was a bowling alley in there, and a Chinese fellow ran it. And as long as you behaved yourself, he'd sell you pop, and you could bring a jug in there with you and drink. And there was a jukebox, and all the pretty girls used to come there on Friday nights and hang out. And so that was kind of my lifestyle. And was in there one Friday night, and this girl walked through the door. I'll never forget her. She had long blonde hair. She had long legs. She was wearing high heels and a mini skirt. And I immediately fell in love with her when our eyes locked. And that's when the second phenomenon of craving took place. And so I was to go on that weekend and party it up with Lucille. And I went back to camp on Sunday, and we hooked onto a tow and went to work. And I remember thinking the next morning that I had arrived. I had a job, I had money, I had booze, there was women in my life, and things were good. And what I failed to realize then, that was the beginning of the start of the end. I was on the high road to hell, and there was no way of going back. And so, I can't remember, 6 or 8 months later, I left there, and I come down to the island, and I started logging for different people, and I was starting to get into trouble. I was starting to wake up, suffered terribly from blackouts, and I'd come to, and some memory would come back from the night before, and I'd think, oh my God, how can I be doing these things? It was against all my values, all my morals, everything I'd been taught. And I'd come to, and I'd swear up and down, God, I'll never do that again. And you know, when I did it the second or third time, the unacceptable just became the acceptable in my life. And there was no turning back from it. I knew that I was going downhill, that the way I was living wasn't right, but I never put it down to the fact that I was drinking too much. And so I ended up with a guy at a thing in Campbell River. It's called the Codjigga Stop. And it was a big salmon festival. It was a drunk is what it was, but a party they put on there every summer. And we got caught outside in the parking lot doing some shit we shouldn't have been doing. And so the guy that was with me, he was a normal drinker. He was married with 2 kids, and he wasn't like me. So I said, we'll have a meeting. We'll get this all straightened out, and we'll go to the lawyer this week. I'll have the story ready. So he come to my place. I told him what we were going to say, and I never forget what he said. He said, aren't you going to tell the lawyer the truth? I said, hell no. We'll cast the shadow of doubt in his mind. Maybe he'll help us get off. Because I was used to lying and making up alibis for my behavior. And you know, we went to that court. I'll never forget it. We sat in that courtroom most of the day. We got called up. We were the last case of the day. We got cross-examined and whatever. And I'll never forget what that judge said. He summoned us to come before his bench. And we stood there. And he said, if in fact these 2 men before me are lying through their teeth and are good actors, you will be before my bench again. And that gavel, I can hear it ringing tonight, when that wood hit the wood, and he said, you are free to go. And we danced out of that courtroom because we'd got away with another one. But those words that he said rang in my mind. I'd come to in the middle of the night, and I could hear that gavel banging and the things that guy had said to me, because I knew deep down inside that the route I was going on, I was going to be before him again. And you know, a year later, I woke up, bars and cement once again, had another court case hanging over my head, and I just knew that I had to do something different. So I was lucky. I worked for a guy who was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, He'd gone to a treatment center that summer, and I knew he was in the program, and I phoned him up. I told him about the predicament I was in, and he laughed. And I thought, how could you possibly laugh at the position I was in? So anyway, he told me to come up. I went and seen him, and he took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was in a little place between Courtenay and Campbell River called Black Creek Saturday night meeting. And I went to that meeting. I didn't know what to expect. We opened the door. You couldn't see for cigarette smoke in that place. It was just thick. And all these people were lined up around the walls and at the tables, and they were all laughing and joking and talking. And I sat down at that meeting. He said, you don't have to say anything. Just sit there if you don't want to. And they got the meeting underway, and about the fourth or fifth person that talked, this guy got up, and he was just hammered. And he started in on the chairman. This was no good. That was no good. And I didn't know if they were drunk and sober at these things. It was the first one I'd ever been to. And so these two old guys got jumped up, said, hey, come on, partner, we're going to take you out and have a coffee. We'll take you to the coffee shop. And away they went. And about 20 minutes later, these two old-timers come back in, and that guy never did. And it was years later I realized there was no coffee shops around there. There were 15 or 20 miles. I don't know if they dug a hole in the backyard and buried him there, but it's the way it was. So that was my introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I knew one thing from that meeting. People come up and they talk to me at the end of the meeting, and I can't remember what they told me, but I knew one thing, that I felt a little bit better when I left the meeting than when I'd went into the meeting. And so I never went to another meeting that week. And man, I'll tell you, that was some tough week, white-knuckling it on my own. And I phoned my buddy Richard the following Saturday, and he'd gone to camp. And I was like, oh my God, I can't go to that meeting on my own. Then I made a deal with myself. I thought, I'll go to that meeting, but if they don't remember me, I'm leaving. And so I pulled up at that meeting. It was wintertime. It was dark. It was raining, and all these people were funneling into the meeting. So I walked down the driveway, and I opened the door, and the first lady I seen against the far wall said, hey, Larry, good to see you. How was your week? I thought, oh, shit, I guess I got to stay now. And so that was my introduction into Alcoholics Anonymous. And I can tell you, I had a bad attitude. I didn't like the stuff I heard, a lot of it, but I had a court case hanging over my head. So I was obligated to stay there till I got that court case over with. And, you know, they come to step one. It said we were powerless over alcohol. And I can remember thinking, I had never been powerless over anything in my life, in my mind, and that my life was unmanageable. It just wasn't so. I had a job. And so I moved on to step two. And it said in step two that we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And I can remember reading that part in step two. It said his condition could only be described as savage. He was the belligerent one. But that was written for me. I know that now, because that was my attitude. I didn't think I was crazy. What could I turn my life over? I didn't believe there was anything really greater than me. And so I went to step three. And in step three, it said, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood it. Well, I didn't believe in God. I could tell you all about the Catholics, the Protestants, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Hare Krishnas, but I had never, ever been in any one of their organizations. The only time I was in a Catholic church, my buddy was getting married, and he'd asked me and another guy to be an usher, and he made us promise that, please don't drink while you're at the church. Once you go to the reception, fill your boots. So we started drinking that morning about 11 o'clock, and we were all suited up, and we were in that church, and the way they did it was there you asked, are you a friend of the bride or the groom? You sit them on the right or the left. And so we had a Mickey there with us, and we were having a few snorts, and this snooty bitch walked up, and she looked at me, and I don't think she liked it, the condition I was in. And I said, "Are you a friend of the groom or a friend of the brides, ma'am?" And she said, "I'm a friend of the both." I said, "Well, sit in the fucking aisle then." So that was really my thing that I'd learned about church. So I struggled with those steps for a long time in the program. I could not raise the flag to the top of the weight pole, or the weight flag to the top of the pole. I fought with everything. I'd come to a meeting, somebody would talk about something, quote something out of the big book. I'd run home, page 86 or 87, read that thing. God, that's great. I close that big book up and continue on. I got a sponsor. I got involved in a step group. And that step group was here in Nanaimo Bay, and I was logging in Campbell River. And by that time, I was getting desperate to start feeling better about the way I was. And so I came to that step group every Monday night for 17 or 18 weeks. It was a Norvelco series. Some of you might remember them. And that step group helped change my life. I did a step 4. I made that searching and fearless moral inventory of myself. It was scary to me. I didn't want to do it. I was the type of person that I'd do the step as soon as I could figure out what the results were going to be. And I could never figure out what the results were going to be, so I stayed in pain and misery until it got too bad, and then I became willing to do something. I realized after a while, though, that I was coming to meetings and I was admitting that I was powerless over alcohol, that I was an alcoholic. And I realized then, unbeknown to me, I had taken the first step. I didn't accept it, but I was admitting it. And I was starting to see little bit by little that maybe my life was just a little bit unmanageable in a few areas. And in step 2, I always say I came for a long time, I came to, and in the end I came to believe. I started to see that normal people didn't think and act the way that I did, that was abnormal, and the way that I'd lived, the only way I knew how to live was with alcohol. And so I got that step 4 done, and I'd postpone it, I'd throw it back in the drawer, and finally my sponsor said, "Just make the appointment for the 5th step." So I didn't make the appointment, they made it for me. The guy was a Catholic priest, straight one against him. And so they lined me up, and I went down and seen this guy, Father Dan, and told him about my life, and he was just a fabulous human being. He interjected through that step 5 in a few places, and at the end of that step 5, he said to me, "Tell me 3 good things about yourself." And I sat there looking at him. And a few minutes passed, he said, "Tell me 3 good things about yourself." And I couldn't think of one thing. And he said, "I've only known you for a couple hours," and he blurted off these things that he thought was good. And he said, "Your biggest problem is you don't love yourself enough." And I thought, I went through all this pain and anguish with this yin-yang to find out I didn't love myself enough? And away I went. And I went home, and like it said in the book, I took some quiet time, and I did the best that I could at doing steps 6 and 7, because I'd heard them talk at many meetings for a long time about character defects and shortcomings. But I never knew I had any till I did that step 4. And oh my God, I seen, and there were anger ruled my life. I kept people at a distance. I bucked you off at the knees. You weren't getting close to me. And that's how I lived my life. I always said when God was passing out the instructions to live, I was in a bar somewhere ordering another round, because I just didn't have any living skills. And I got to step 8, and had to do that list. It was like it was non-ending to me here. And I made that list off of that 4-step I'd done, and I became willing to do some of those amends, not all of them. So I put the easy ones right at the top, the people that I thought may just accept me now that I wasn't drinking, and I became willing to do them. And in my life, there was amends because of my actions that I could not make because it would harm other people, and I knew that I didn't have the right to do that. And so I came to make those amends, and I was pretty well received. And down the road, those amends that I couldn't make because of those situations, those people appeared in my life. It was unbelievable how it worked out. And I got to step 10, and step 10 is probably my most favorite step in the program because I've had to be so well practiced at it over the years. Is probably why. But that step gives me the freedom to correct my actions when they happen. And by correcting those actions when they happen, I don't have to go back and do another step 4 or 5. I take care of those issues as they come up. And I could always see in the beginning, I was the first to admit when I was right, but it was tough to admit when I was wrong. They talk about this program being a program of ego deflation, of humbling ourselves, of becoming right-sized, but I couldn't see any of that in the beginning. And I got to step 11, and I had been searching for a long, long time in this program to come up with some conception of what God was to me. I always saw if somebody could just bring a picture up into a meeting and point them out, it would be over. So I got involved in a lot of different things. I read a lot of Emmett Fox. I read different books. I went to a thing called Unity. Read all the material I could get my hands on, and over a long period of time, I realized that there was something in this world had been running my life long time before I got here. So I was trying to practice to meditate, and it says somewhere in the book that we get into a peaceful place and we close our eyes and imagine a river floating by, and I'd be there trying to do that, and then a big steelhead would jump out of that river and make a big splash, and I just was no good at it. So I struggled with that for a long time, and, that noise, that continuous insanity that would play in my brain day in and day out, I had no way of controlling it. And I would say that serenity prayer, I'm sure I wore it out in the first 5 years in sobriety. And I finally got to a place where, through metaphysics, where I could stop. Netflix shut the show down for 10 or 15 minutes, and I would get that peace, and that serenity would come over me. And the odd time I'd even get an intuitive thought. And so I tried to make that, a practice of my daily life. Nowhere in that book does it tell me to understand. It says to accept and apply these principles in my life. And if I accept and apply these principles in my life, great things will come to pass. Way better things than I could have ever have dreamt of. And so it was a learning progress. I was a works in progress. And step 12, having had that spiritual awakening, I chased that for a long time in this program. Everybody else was having them except me. I had lots of rude awakenings, but very few spiritual awakenings. And so, through the practice of the 12 steps and coming to believe and surrendering my old ideas. My old ideas give me old results, but yet I hung on to them for a long time in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know why I could or couldn't give up on some of that stuff, but maybe I was just looking for an easier, softer way. So when I had finally done all those steps and was trying to put the program into practice to the best of my ability, things started to change. Other people became more important to me. I remember hearing people, we used to go to coffee in them days after a meeting, and they were talking about being a positive person. When you go through the cashier at a grocery store, say to the girl, hope you have a good day. Little things like that. So I tried to put these things into practice in my own life and be an example of what Alcoholics Anonymous was. I wasn't a very good one in the beginning, but I learned through this program and you people to become a better person because of that. I am so grateful today to have come into AA at the age I did. I was 26. And I remember that meeting. There was me and one other girl. We were the two youngest people, and I thought, my life is over. I have come to the end of the road here in a room of a bunch of drunks. And so I can only tell you today through my journey here that I am so grateful today that I've been able to live sober and sane, well, sober anyway, for 40 some odd years in this program. The gifts I've been given, the life I have lived is unbelievable. You know, I hear a lot of things at meetings. There's new people. I love newcomers. They're the lifeblood of Alcoholics Anonymous. I like what they say. I learn so much from them. A lot of them, some of my friends are here tonight, they struggle with things that I've never had to deal with. And they suit up and they show up and they come here on a regular basis and they live the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and pass it on to me. I'm so grateful for those people. And you know, I hear a lot of things sometimes. Somebody's coming in and out, they're this, that. Negativity, criticism, condemnation has no place here. It doesn't work. What works is love, reaching out. If they knew how to stay sober or knew what to do, they wouldn't be going back and forth out there. We got to love them. The same way the good people of AA held me up, prompted me up, and stood me up until I was able to stand on my own 2 feet. And I'll be forever grateful for that. I was thinking here the other day, I was talking to my buddy Ron that we were doing a little project together, and I thought, God, here I started out at that Nanaimo rally so many years ago. Didn't know what I was getting into, what Alcoholics Anonymous is going to bring into my life, what road it was going to take me down. Didn't know if I could stay sober. And 40 some odd years later, I'm here with all you people, standing here talking to you. I would never have thought that. I couldn't have dreamt that in my wildest dreams. It's emotional to me. My sponsor of 30 some odd years was here in Nanaimo till he passed away 10 years ago. You know, I've been given the gift of sobriety, and I'm only given it contingent on my spiritual condition every day. That's all I get out of it. And so, you know, there's a lot of other people here to share tonight. So I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I'm just blessed to be here and be a member of this program. So good night and God bless. Thank you.
Third, great. Thank you very much, Larry. And I would like to call on Vi to come introduce Brittany.
And again, I'm fine. I'm an alcoholic. But yeah, I get the pleasure of introducing Brittany as well, an old timer and a newcomer. Brittany is in her, well, she's had a year now. I'm her sponsor, and I just love her. You know, she's been so dedicated to Alcoholics Anonymous in her first year. You know, she'd come over to my place and sit and talk. She phoned me every day. We went through the steps together. And yeah, she's just very, very committed and dedicated to staying sober. And yeah, I just love you to death, Brittany. Come on up. Hard. You have a here.
Okay. Whew. Hi, my name's Brittany. I'm an alcoholic.
What's your name?
Whew, okay. Yeah. I'm gonna start out by saying thank you everybody who put this rally on. All the hard work and time. I have the pleasure of knowing somebody who is involved in this, and I never knew how much work was put into this. So, yeah, thank you guys for doing this so that we can celebrate Alcoholics Anonymous, right? My journey in recovery hasn't been easy. It hasn't been seamless. It's actually been kind of a fucking mess. But like standing up here today, I wouldn't change that for the world. I remember going to my first meeting, and the room was full. People were happy. People were talking and socializing, and I just wanted to sit in the corner, and I didn't want anyone to recognize me. I didn't want anyone to talk to me. I didn't want anyone to ask me to share. And of course, I was asked to share, and I didn't. I don't remember what was said at that meeting. I don't remember really who was there. But I do remember the feeling that I got when I was in that room. And I remember thinking when I was in there, like, oh my God, I'm not alone anymore. I remember people saying things out loud and sharing these things in this room full of people that I was too afraid to even say in my own head. I know now, looking back on them, and that was like a small spiritual awakening, right? Like I no longer thought that I was weird. I no longer thought that I was like this messed up person and that I didn't belong in society. I knew that there was a place for me. I actually think I went to that first meeting loaded, so I actually wasn't sober, but I was at a meeting, right? I didn't connect with anybody there. I didn't take any of the suggestions. And because I didn't change anything, nothing changed in my life, right? My addiction took me to a place where my family was sick of my shit. My people in my life were sick of my stuff. I had lost countless jobs. I dropped out of school countless times. Went to treatment quite a few times, and yeah, it just took me to a place of like, it was literally like I was going to choose to be homeless and like live that type of life, or I was going to choose recovery. And it took a long, long time for me to get to a point to make that decision. I remember being in the rooms and people like making these suggestions that like, get a sponsor, use your sponsor, do the steps, connect with women after the meeting, phone women on the phone list. And I didn't think any of those things applied to me. I would get a sponsor and I wouldn't call her. I just would tell people that I had a sponsor. I would try and work the steps, but that I never did. It was never honest. I was afraid of women. I never wanted to build a relationship with any other woman. I was one of those people in the rooms that I would find the sickest man and I would decide that we were right for each other and I would make that relationship work somehow. I would be completely miserable in that relationship, but I was too afraid that like if I let that relationship go, that no one else would ever love me because I didn't love myself, right? yeah, I just didn't know how to be alone. I always had a codependent relationship. You know, looking back on my life when I was younger, I always had like one best friend, or I was in a relationship. I never knew how to have a group of women in my life, just because it scared me, right? I didn't want to have to be vulnerable. I didn't want to, yeah, I, yeah, it was something that I would just never put the effort into learning. Um, what else can I say here? Yeah, my journey wasn't easy, like I said, right? I remember my parents sharing at my cake, and they were saying, like, you know, for the first 8 years of my addiction, they just wanted me to get better and they wanted me to find some help. But the last 2 years, they just wanted to try and keep me alive somehow. I became a liar. I manipulated people. I stole. I cheated. I lied. Like, I did all the things, right? And it became such a normal thing for me that I didn't even have to think about it anymore. It was just automatic. Someone would ask me a question and I would lie, because that was just, for some reason, the easiest thing for me to do. It didn't even occur to me to try and be honest. Yeah, I know that's something that I had to like be rigorously honest when I came in this last time with everybody and anybody, and like, lo and behold, I stopped doing things that I had to lie about, because like coming clean about things it didn't feel good anymore, right? So I was just like, I'm just not going to do these things so that I don't have to lie, or that I don't have to come clean about them later. Yeah, so I came into recovery this last time, and I went to treatment, and I remember my counselor telling me, like, Brittany, I actually don't know what I can teach you anymore. You know this stuff, and I don't know what to do anymore. And that kind of hit home for me, right? I was like, there's no magic pill, there's no magic sentence, there's no secret you're keeping from me to keep me better anywhere. And I think at that moment, it wasn't a conscious decision, but I like decided to start listening to what they had to say. I would go to treatment, or I would go to detox, and I would always leave in a relationship. And so this last time going to treatment, my counselor told me, he's like, stay away from men. Just don't even talk to them. Don't even walk with them. And I was like, how am I supposed to do that? And it wasn't easy, right? Because I was in obviously a co-ed treatment center, and it was a challenge. But it was like I finally woke up, and I accepted the challenge, and I surrounded myself with women. And I had women keep me accountable, right? When I was walking with a man, they would call me out. Or even in a group with like several women and several men, like I chose to stay with the women. And after a little bit of time, it got easier for me. Yeah, what else? I had to do like a step 1, 2, 3 every single day. And I got to get honest about the littlest, tiniest thing that I had done. And I had realized, like, at that time when I got honest about something, like, my life wasn't over. People didn't hate me. I wasn't shamed. I was just given the opportunity to do better tomorrow. And yeah, it felt really good. It was suggested to me to go to a second stage housing after treatment, and I was not thrilled about that idea. I actually told him I didn't want to go there, but I actually had no choice. My family was not going to let me come back home. I had no money because obviously I spent it all, and I had no choice. So I had to go to this second stage, and I was scared. I was going to be living with 6 or 7 other women in a city that I wasn't familiar with. And yeah, it was a really scary feeling. I remember being there the first day and crying and wanting my mom to come and fix it and someone to make it better. I wanted to go back to Kamloops, and I remember calling her. Actually, before I called her, I remember actually saying out loud, God, please help me. And I think that was the first time that I actually had a sincere prayer and asked for help. It was really uncomfortable for a couple of days, but looking back on that, like, God did come into my life and he did help me. I had people reach out to me. The situation ended up getting better slowly but surely. It wasn't comfortable, but like inch by inch, things started to get a little tiny bit better. And before I knew it, like, I woke up happy. I no longer woke up wanting to die or being disappointed that I woke up. That for a long time in my addiction, I would come to in the morning and I would be disappointed that I was awake. I actually didn't want to continue on with my life. And so, yeah, when I came in this time and I started taking the suggestions and doing the things, like, I remember waking up happy. I remember having a higher power, or not remember, I do have a higher power in my life today. And that actually blows my mind, because for the longest time, I would have people ask me, like, Brittany, do you have a higher power? Do you have a connection? Like, all of these things. And I would either lie and say yes, or I would say no, because I didn't understand how a higher power was going to keep me sober. And today I know that I don't have to understand how my higher power keeps me sober. I just know deep down in my gut that my higher power does keep me sober today, right? And I work on my relationship with my higher power. It's not just something that I can say is happening. I know that I have to, like, sit and meditate and pray and do the things that are suggested. Yeah, my life isn't perfect today. This week I actually had a couple of, how do I say this? A couple of things happen that were really emotional. I had the opportunity to be honest with someone who was really, really close to me, and it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to turn out, right? But I know I did my part as a friend, and I know that I got to show her the love that other people have shown me in these rooms. And then I can put my head on the pillow at night knowing that I did what I had to do for that person, and whatever her journey is, I can love her when she decides. I can love her regardless, right? I can love her for her and be there for her when she needs me. Yeah, I'm able to speak my truth today, and it's not always easy, but that's it's not always easy, but, like, thank God I've built a support group of women in my life that I can call. Something would happen before and I would sit with it and I would feel gross about it, and I would try and make up some lie about how I was going to get out of it, or I would, like, try and please the other person. And today it's not like that, right? I get to speak my truth, and I get to talk to other women in my life and get their feedback, and I get the opportunity to grow. I get the opportunity to change, and thank God for that, right? Because if I didn't get to change, I don't think I would be happy today, right? Because I was miserable for a very, very long time. And I've heard it said in these rooms before, and Larry kind of mentioned it too, like, I feel like everybody got a handbook for life, and I didn't get that handbook. I remember seeing people happy and, like, going to work and, like, walking their dog and being like, what? Like, how do you just do those things and be happy about it, right? Like, and today I get to be one of those people who go to work and be happy, and I can go and walk a dog and, like, do all of the things. And I get to have a good life, and I get to be happy, and I get to change because I come to AA, because I talk to my sponsor, and because I work the steps, right? Yeah, and that blows my mind that I even get to come up here and say that that's my truth, because for a very, very long time, I didn't think that I was ever going to be one of those people. I either thought that I was going to get to manipulate everybody into thinking I was sober and continuing to use and drink for a very, very long time. But turns out that when you're a room full of sober people, they kind of know when you're loaded, right? So I didn't actually, that didn't work out so well. So I had to take the road of like getting honest and doing the next right thing and doing the uncomfortable things. And I don't always I actually very rarely do I like it. But I like waking up happy. I like having a relationship with my family. I like having a relationship with my higher power and with women and with myself, right? Like that's the biggest thing. I get to have a relationship with myself. I can sit by myself today and I don't have to feel like I need somebody beside me, or I don't have to feel like I need to be doing something to get outside of myself. That's as a result of like doing the things that are suggested. I don't have much more to say. I just am super, super happy that I am a sober person who is a part of Alcoholics Anonymous today. I am super grateful for the life that I have. I'll finish with this story. So my dad has a really, really good friend, and he's in the program in Kamloops. And I remember we were texting one day, and I can't exactly remember what I said, but I was just telling him how happy I was in my life. And he was like, I'm so happy you found the gift of gratitude. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like I'm grateful today, right? Like I'm grateful for the little things. And yeah, that just hit me like a ton of bricks that, gratitude's always a topic at a meeting, or people are always saying you need to be grateful, do a gratitude list, blah, blah, blah. But it was like, I got to be grateful without even knowing that I was grateful. So that I don't know, that meant a lot to me, right? So yeah, I don't know what else to say. I hope some of that made sense. I am going to take another 24, and I'm going to wish everyone another 24 as well.
It's